The sun hung low over the village, casting a warm, golden hue across the dusty streets and thatched-roof cottages. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and fresh earth, a scent that had always been comforting to Armin. Yet today, the familiar smells, the quiet chirping of birds, and the distant laughter of children did little to ease the turmoil inside him. For weeks, whispers had filled the village about a forthcoming marriage, and now the truth had been revealed. He was to marry a native woman he had never met. The announcement, delivered with solemn certainty by his father, left Armin stunned. His heart pounding in disbelief. Armin had grown up believing in fairness, in the simple justice of being able to choose his own path. The thought of marrying a stranger, someone whose customs, habits, and beliefs were completely unknown to him, was almost unbearable. In the village, traditions were rigid, and family honor often outweighed personal desire. Armin had heard stories of arranged marriages, of couples forced together by duty rather than affection, but he had never imagined that he would be the one facing such a fate. The concept seemed alien. A script he had never auditioned for yet was now being thrust upon him without warning. His father, a stern yet respected man in the village, spoke with a voice devoid of hesitation. "Armin, it is decided. Layla is the one. Her family has approached us, and it is the honor of our family to accept this alliance. You are expected to obey." The words hung in the air like a heavy curtain, blocking out any hope of protest. Armin opened his mouth to argue, to plead for understanding, but no words came. It was as if the weight of generations pressed down on his shoulders, rendering him speechless. His mother, sitting quietly beside his father, reached out and placed a hand over his. There was no anger, no triumph in her eyes, only resignation. "We only want what is best for you," she whispered. "You must understand. These arrangements protect the family and ensure our place in the village. You will come to see it as your duty." Armin felt a wave of conflict rising within him. Love, companionship, and trust were foreign ideas in this arrangement, replaced by obligation, honor, and expectation. How could he honor such a union when he had no connection to the woman he was supposed to spend his life with? For the next few hours, Armin wandered aimlessly through the village. He passed familiar landmarks, the well where he fetched water each morning, the small market stall where he helped his father sell produce, and the open field where children played barefoot under the sun. Everything appeared unchanged. Yet nothing felt familiar. The prospect of meeting Layla, of stepping into a life he had not chosen, transformed the world around him into something uncertain and foreign. Rumors about Layla had reached him through hushed conversations and glances. She was described as strong-willed, intelligent, and deeply rooted in her native customs. Some spoke of her beauty, others of her sharp mind, and a few whispered that she could be stubborn, unyielding. Armin did not know what to expect, and that uncertainty gnawed at him relentlessly. Would she accept him? Would she resent him as much as he resented the circumstances? The questions circled in his mind without end, each one heavier than the last. Despite his internal struggle, Armin could not ignore the expectations surrounding him. Villagers nodded politely when he walked past, curious eyes observing his every move. Family friends offered polite advice and encouragement, reinforcing the idea that this was a noble duty he must fulfill. Rebellion seemed futile, and even the thought of refusal felt like a betrayal of not only his family, but the delicate balance of village life itself. He realized that his personal feelings were dwarfed by the weight of tradition, yet he could not help the flutter of unease in his chest. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, Armin returned home. The village was alive with the distant sound of drums and singing from a neighboring wedding celebration. a stark reminder of the life he had never chosen. Sitting alone, he felt the magnitude of what lay ahead. A marriage to a woman he had never seen, bound by duty, watched by the entire village, with consequences that would ripple through generations. The path forward was unclear, the emotions within him a tangled mix of fear, resentment, and a flicker of curiosity. The morning of the meeting dawned crisp and clear, with a pale sun illuminating the village in soft light. Birds chirped nervously, as if they sensed the tension in the air and the faint smell of dew mixed with the aroma of baked bread from nearby kitchens. Armand felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest, a mix of anxiety and curiosity. Today he would meet Layla, the woman he was to marry, a stranger in every sense of the word. His father led the way to the courtyard, where Layla's family had arrived, the wooden cart she had traveled in creaking gently under its burden. Villagers had gathered discreetly along the edges, whispers rippling through the crowd like wind over dry grass. Armand's heart pounded in his ears as he caught the first glimpse of her. Layla stepped down from the cart with a composed grace that immediately captured the attention of everyone present. She was modestly dressed, her attire reflecting her native customs, yet there was a quiet elegance in her movements, a self-assuredness that seemed at odds with the uncertainty surrounding this forced union. Their eyes met briefly, and in that instant, Armand felt a curious mix of emotions. There was a spark of apprehension, certainly, but also an inexplicable recognition, as though he had glimpsed a kindred spirit in a world that had never offered him one. Layla's gaze was steady, assessing, neither hostile nor overly welcoming. She had been prepared for the meeting, aware that the eyes of two families and the entire village would scrutinize her every gesture. Yet she did not falter. The formal introductions followed, punctuated by polite nods and measured smiles. Armand's father spoke first, praising the alliance and emphasizing the honor of their families joining through this marriage. Layla's father responded with equal decorum, recounting her virtues and character. All the while, Armand and Layla exchanged few words, each careful not to reveal the whirlwind of thoughts inside their minds. Their conversation, when it came, was tentative and cautious, a fragile dance of inquiry and response. "Welcome to our village," Armand finally said, his voice steady but betraying the smallest tremor of uncertainty. I hope your journey was not too difficult." Layla inclined her head politely. "It was long, but manageable." "Your village is beautiful," she replied, her tone calm and deliberate, betraying neither fear nor hesitation. There was a subtle strength in her words, a quiet confidence that immediately commanded respect. Armand noted the way she chose her words carefully, with precision and thought, hinting at a sharp mind and a composed spirit. Despite the cordiality of the exchange, tension simmered beneath the surface. Both were acutely aware that their union had been dictated by tradition, not choice, and that every action and glance would be scrutinized. Layla's eyes occasionally flickered toward the villagers, noting their whispers and judgmental stares, while Armand felt the weight of expectation pressing him to appear welcoming and accommodating, even as confusion and doubt churned within him. The initial small talk centered around neutral topics: the journey, the weather, and mutual acquaintances known to both families. But every word carried a subtext of caution and restraint. Armand was careful not to sound disinterested or dismissive, and Layla balanced politeness with subtle assertions of her independence. It was clear to both that establishing mutual respect, even in this forced circumstance, would require delicate navigation. An early challenge arose when a child from the village, curious and unabashed, approached the couple, offering a shy greeting. Armand smiled awkwardly, unsure how to respond, while Layla knelt gracefully to return the gesture. The simple act spoke volumes. Armand noticed her natural warmth, her ability to put others at ease despite the formal and tense atmosphere. For the first time, he felt a flicker of hope that perhaps this union, though unchosen, might not be entirely unbearable. The days following their first meeting were marked by an uneasy rhythm. Armand and Layla moved through the village like two dancers learning a complex, unfamiliar choreography, each step tentative, each gesture weighed against tradition, expectation, and their own private uncertainties. What had seemed a simple arrangement on paper now revealed itself to be a tangled web of cultural differences, personal habits, and unspoken rules that neither fully understood. From the start, the clashes were subtle but persistent. Armand, raised with the careful routines and unbending expectations of his family, expected Layla to adapt to his world swiftly. She, on the other hand, had grown up with a different set of customs, values, and practices, and she naturally expected him to meet her halfway. The friction was inevitable. One morning, as they prepared for a communal meal, Armand insisted that Layla follow the precise order and procedure his family observed. Layla complied outwardly, but her eyes revealed quiet resistance, and she subtly corrected his younger siblings when they faltered, demonstrating that her wisdom and method differed from his father's teachings. The first argument erupted over something seemingly trivial, the arrangement of household items. Armand had always maintained a meticulous order in the home, believing that discipline and precision reflected personal honor. Layla, however, saw functionality and accessibility as more important than strict order. When Armand attempted to reorganize the kitchen according to his rules, Layla quietly but firmly protested. "This works better for us," she said, gesturing to her arrangement. "It may not follow your way, but it is practical." The argument escalated quickly, each defending not just their method but their worldview. Armand's voice rose with frustration, emphasizing tradition, respect, and obedience, while Layla remained calm yet unyielding, invoking practicality, efficiency, and common sense. Villagers passing by whispered at the open windows, some disapproving of Layla's assertiveness, others quietly admiring her composure. By the end of the episode, both felt a sting of disappointment and unease, realizing that harmony would require patience and compromise far beyond what either had anticipated. Beyond domestic disputes, the couple faced the subtle yet pervasive challenge of cultural interpretation. Layla's native customs, gestures, speech patterns, even the timing of her meals, were foreign to Armand. He found himself constantly misinterpreting her intentions, sometimes imagining slight or disrespect where none existed. Meanwhile, Layla struggled to understand the rigid hierarchy of Armand's family, feeling constrained by unspoken rules and wary of causing offense. Their interactions became a delicate balancing act, each trying to assert identity without triggering conflict. Despite the tension, small moments of insight began to emerge. Armand noticed how Layla interacted with children and elders, displaying patience, kindness, and quiet intelligence that his family often overlooked. She had a knack for resolving disputes and calming fears, whether among villagers or household staff, that impressed him despite his initial reluctance to acknowledge it. For her part, Layla recognized Armand's honesty and integrity, his genuine desire to fulfill his duties even while grappling with resentment and uncertainty. These glimpses of character laid the groundwork for a grudging respect that neither could yet voice. Community events further magnified their differences. During a village celebration, Armand and Layla were expected to perform a series of ceremonial tasks together. Their different approaches to ritual timing, movement, and etiquette led to visible tension, drawing curious eyes from the crowd. Armand became frustrated by what he perceived as deviations from protocol, while Layla felt constrained by arbitrary rules that did not resonate with her sense of order and purpose. Yet, as the festival progressed, they found themselves improvising, blending their methods to complete the tasks successfully. The villagers, initially skeptical, murmured approval at the couple's ability to cooperate despite their obvious differences. The experience taught Armin that Layla's perspective was not an attack on tradition, but an alternative approach that could complement his own. Similarly, Layla realized that while Arman was strict and sometimes rigid, his adherence to principles came from a place of respect and responsibility. This mutual recognition, subtle and often unspoken, marked a turning point. It did not erase their differences, but it introduced the possibility that understanding could emerge from patience, empathy, and careful observation. By the end of the week, Armin and Layla were still strangers in many ways, but their clashes had begun to form, a bridge of familiarity. Arguments and misunderstandings continued, but each carried the faint hope of resolution rather than resentment. They were learning the most difficult lesson of all, that marriage, especially one born of obligation, was not merely about agreement, but about adaptation, compromise, and the courage to see the world through another's eyes. The morning air carried a crisp chill, a gentle reminder that change often came quietly before it revealed itself in dramatic form. Arman awoke with a restless energy that he could not quite place, a sense that today would be unlike any other. The village itself seemed to hum with anticipation, the distant clatter of tools, the laughter of children, and the rhythmic sounds of daily labor merging into a symphony of ordinary life. Yet Armin's thoughts were singularly focused on Layla, whose presence had become both a source of tension and a quiet fascination in his life. The opportunity for that fascination to evolve arrived sooner than expected. A crisis had begun to unfold near the edge of the village. A small fire, fed by a gust of wind, threatened to spread through a cluster of wooden homes. Smoke curled into the sky, black and threatening, as villagers rushed toward the danger, shouting warnings and attempting to control the blaze with buckets of water. Panic and confusion rippled through the crowd, and Arman, momentarily paralyzed by the suddenness of the event, realized that action was required. Layla moved first. Without hesitation, she directed villagers to form a coordinated chain, ensuring that water was passed efficiently from the well to the fire's edge. Her commands were calm, precise, and authoritative, yet delivered with a kindness that inspired trust. Armin watched, momentarily speechless, as she orchestrated the efforts with a natural leadership he had never seen before. The villagers responded instantly to her guidance, moving with purpose under her direction. Compelled to act, Armin joined the effort, attempting to organize his own group of helpers. At first, the two operated in parallel, their instructions sometimes overlapping, sometimes conflicting, leading to brief moments of chaos. A bucket was dropped, a shout went unheard, and frustration flared between the two of them. But Layla did not falter. She met Armin's gaze and, without diminishing her own authority, invited him to work alongside her. "We need to coordinate," she said simply, her tone steady but insistent. "If we act together, we can save them all." Arman hesitated only briefly before recognizing the truth in her words. He moved to her side, allowing their efforts to merge into a unified strategy. Side by side, they worked seamlessly, Arman handling the physical labor with strength and precision, Layla directing the flow with clarity and calm. The fire, which had threatened to consume several homes, was gradually brought under control. Smoke still lingered in the air, but the immediate danger was contained. In those tense, harrowing hours, Armin saw Layla in a new light. She was more than a stranger or an obligation. She was competent, courageous, and decisive. Her ability to remain calm in chaos, to see solutions where others saw only panic, impressed him deeply. Layla, in turn, observed Armin's dedication, his willingness to risk himself for the villagers' safety, and his quiet sense of responsibility. Both recognized qualities in each other that transcended cultural differences and initial misunderstandings. By the time the fire was finally extinguished, the villagers had gathered, breathing heavily but relieved. Gratitude and admiration were evident in their eyes, their whispers turning to murmurs of approval for the couple who had led the effort. Even the elders, often critical of change or deviation from tradition, nodded with acknowledgement. Armin felt a subtle shift within himself, a respect for Layla that went beyond mere tolerance, a recognition of her strength and character that could not be ignored. In the evening, as the village settled and the last embers of the day's chaos cooled, Armin and Layla sat together near the edge of the courtyard. They spoke little, yet the silence between them was comfortable, filled with a mutual understanding forged in fire and action. Layla broke the quiet, not with instruction but with reflection. "We did well today," she said softly. "Even with differences, we found a way to work together." Armin nodded, aware that this statement was more profound than it seemed. Their cooperation had required humility, trust, and openness, qualities that were the foundation of any meaningful partnership. That night, Armin lay in his room thinking about the day. He realized that respect was not granted by obligation. It was earned through action, courage, and empathy. Layla had earned his respect not through tradition or compliance, but through her unwavering strength and wisdom. He also understood that he had in turn earned a measure of hers by contributing honestly and wholeheartedly to a shared goal, despite his reservations and preconceived notions. The days following the fire seemed calm at first, but the village's calm was deceptive. As with any small community, where news traveled faster than the wind, the story of Armin and Layla's cooperation spread quickly. Whispers began in hushed tones floating from one corner of the village to another. "Did you see how she commanded everyone during the fire?" one villager remarked. "And Armin, he followed her instructions willingly. Strange, isn't it?" Another added, "A marriage forced by tradition, yet they managed so well together. Something is brewing there." These murmurs, innocent in origin, began to grow, carrying subtle judgments, speculation, and curiosity in equal measure. Armin felt the shift almost immediately. His every action, however ordinary, now seemed to be under scrutiny. Villagers watched him, noting whether he assisted Layla respectfully, whether he looked frustrated, whether he smiled or frowned. Each encounter with the community became a delicate performance. Even as he strove to remain composed, a growing unease crept in, gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. How would Layla perceive this attention? Would she feel pressured, judged, or diminished by it? The questions lingered uncomfortably, a constant reminder that their private struggle for understanding had become a public spectacle. Layla, ever perceptive, noticed the subtle shifts in behavior around her as well. Some villagers cast admiring glances. Others whispered behind her back, their words often tinged with skepticism or envy. Children would occasionally pause to stare, sensing the tension and novelty of the situation, while elders observed with cautious interest, weighing every gesture against their expectations of propriety and tradition. Though Layla carried herself with her usual composure, a shadow of concern passed through her mind. Rumors could be harmless, she knew, but in a village so tightly bound by reputation and expectation, they had the power to twist perceptions and influence behavior in ways neither of them could control. One afternoon, while fetching water from the well, Armin overheard two women discussing their household chores and the couple's growing closeness. "He seems to listen to her now," one whispered. "Perhaps he's softening. But is that respect or fear of being judged?" The other laughed lightly, a sound that carried more curiosity than malice. "Either way, the whole village is watching. A marriage like this is not supposed to change people. They'll see who bends first." Armin's stomach tightened. The idea of being judged, of every small decision scrutinized, was exhausting, yet he also recognized the truth. Perceptions mattered in this community, whether fair or not. At home, the tension seeped into the couple's interactions. Armand found himself hesitating before speaking, conscious that Layla might misinterpret his tone or that the villagers might misconstrue a private moment if seen. Layla noticed his restraint but did not press him. Instead, she focused on maintaining her calm demeanor, offering quiet support while navigating the scrutiny together. Their conversations grew more deliberate, thoughtful, and cautious. Even small disagreements, like the placement of utensils or the timing of meals, now carried the added weight of public observation, forcing both to temper impulsive reactions with patience and diplomacy. One evening, the whispers reached a turning point. A visiting family member, unfamiliar with the couple's developing rapport, commented openly during a communal meal, "I hear you've grown accustomed to each other rather quickly. Is there affection forming where none was intended?" The comment hung in the air, heavy with implication. Armand's face flushed, a mix of embarrassment and frustration, while Layla met the remark with quiet dignity, neither confirming nor denying it. Yet in that moment, both understood the unspoken truth. Their private world was no longer entirely their own. The village's eyes were upon them, and every gesture, every smile, every subtle expression could be interpreted, misinterpreted, or magnified. Despite the pressure, something unexpected began to happen. The rumors, while invasive, forced Armand and Layla to reflect on their relationship more honestly. They could no longer rely solely on obligation and duty. They were becoming aware of mutual feelings, however nascent. Each glance, each shared task, each word spoken with care was now infused with intention, whether conscious or unconscious. The scrutiny of the village, once a source of discomfort, became a lens through which they examined themselves and each other, revealing qualities that might have otherwise remained hidden. By the week's end, the tension between public expectation and private reality reached a delicate balance. Armand and Layla had grown more attuned to each other's moods, habits, and perspectives. The whispers of the villagers continued, but they had lost their power to dictate the couple's every move. In fact, the shared challenge of navigating rumor and speculation strengthened their bond, cultivating trust, patience, and a deeper understanding. The morning air carried a tense stillness, a quiet that often precedes upheaval. Armand awoke with a restless feeling he could not immediately name, but the faint smell of smoke from the far edge of the village quickly explained it. A fire had broken out in a neighboring barn, one that housed livestock and stored hay, essential for the survival of several families. Panic spread like wildfire through the village. As people rushed toward the danger, buckets of water in hand, voices raised in alarm. Armand's first instinct was to act, but unlike the previous minor fire, this one was more threatening. The wind was shifting, sending sparks toward other structures. The villagers moved chaotically, some frantic, others paralyzed by indecision. It was a test of not just skill, but character, courage, and leadership. Layla arrived moments later, her presence calm yet commanding. She immediately assessed the situation, directing villagers to form lines and transport water efficiently. "We need to work together," she called out, her voice firm but steady. "Do not panic. Everyone has a role." Her words cut through the chaos, organizing action from disorder. Armand observed her quietly, noting the precision with which she moved, her awareness of every person's abilities, and the confidence in her directions. The real test came when a beam, scorched and unstable, threatened to collapse onto the livestock. A group of villagers froze, uncertain how to proceed without risking injury. Armand did not hesitate. With a deep breath, he grabbed a rope and, using careful coordination, worked alongside others to secure the animals and reinforce the structure, temporarily. Layla noticed his initiative and moved to guide him, not to criticize, but to ensure efficiency and safety. Their coordination was seamless, a blend of strength, strategy, and trust. During the height of the fire, a smaller child from the barn's owner ran toward danger, drawn by curiosity and panic. Armin reacted instinctively, rushing forward to intercept the child before harm could come. Layla, following closely, helped to guide both the child and Armin away from falling debris. The moment was brief but telling. It revealed Armin's courage and instinctive protective nature, qualities that had not yet been fully recognized by Layla or the villagers. As the fire continued to rage, the villagers worked tirelessly, following Layla's instructions while relying on Armin's strength and judgment. Every task, from forming chains of water to moving livestock to safer areas, required trust, cooperation, and decisive action. Despite the danger, there was no chaos between the two. They complemented each other, each aware of the other's strengths and limitations. Armin's initial hesitation and resentment toward this marriage had transformed into focused determination, driven by the need to protect lives and property alongside someone he had once regarded as merely a stranger. By mid-afternoon, the fire was finally brought under control, with only minor damage to the barn and surrounding area. Smoke still drifted lazily into the sky, but the immediate threat had been neutralized. Villagers, exhausted but relieved, looked at Armin and Layla with a mix of admiration and newfound respect. Even those who had whispered doubts about their compatibility were forced to reconsider, witnessing firsthand the effectiveness of their combined efforts. For Armin, the day had been transformative. He realized that courage was not simply about facing danger, it was about rising to responsibility, acting decisively when others faltered, and protecting the vulnerable, even at personal risk. He had seen Layla's capabilities in action and had learned from her calm, strategic approach. More importantly, he recognized that his judgment of her as a stranger or a burden had been short-sighted. Her skills, wisdom, and composure were invaluable, and her presence made him better, more capable. Layla, too, reflected on the day. She had observed Armin not just as her husband by arrangement, but as a man of character, integrity, and courage. His actions had proven that he could rise above his resentment and act selflessly, demonstrating qualities essential for a partner in both life and crisis. The day's events deepened her respect for him, transforming initial obligation into admiration and trust. As night fell and the village settled, both Armin and Layla stood outside the remaining barn, surveying the work they had accomplished. Together, the fire had tested them, revealing strengths, weaknesses, and, most importantly, the ability to rely on one another. It was no longer just a test of survival. It had become a lesson in partnership, understanding, and respect. In the quiet aftermath of the barn fire, the village returned to its usual rhythm. But for Armin and Layla, the world had subtly shifted. The fire had tested them, revealing hidden strengths and mutual respect, and the echoes of that shared ordeal lingered in the way they moved, spoke, and interacted. The tension that had defined their early days together now softened into a cautious, almost imperceptible warmth. Neither would yet call it love, but something had begun to grow. A tentative affection, delicate as the first green shoots of spring pushing through frozen soil. It began in small gestures. Armin noticed the way Layla would leave a cup of tea at his bedside in the morning, a simple act that spoke of thoughtfulness and care. He had previously assumed her actions would be purely functional or ritualistic, but the quiet attention she gave him suggested something more. Each morning, he felt a fleeting sense of gratitude that was new to him, a feeling that did not spring from obligation, but from genuine recognition of her kindness. Layla, in turn, observed Armin with increasing appreciation. She saw the subtle ways he tried to accommodate her customs, the patience he displayed when misunderstandings arose, and the quiet determination he exhibited during the fire. In moments when he was unaware of her gaze, she caught glimpses of his humanity. The small smiles, the expressions of concern for others, and the way he treated the village children with unexpected gentleness. Slowly, admiration began to intertwine with respect, laying the groundwork for feelings neither fully understood but could not deny. One afternoon, a task in the village required the couple to work closely together once more. The irrigation channels, for the fields needed repair, and both were asked to supervise teams of villagers. Side by side, they coordinated efforts, guided workers, and solved problems as they arose. The ease of their cooperation surprised them both. Armin found himself anticipating Layla's suggestions, learning to trust her judgment instinctively. Layla, for her part, smiled inwardly at his growing attentiveness, noticing that he had begun to listen more and assert less. During a brief pause in their work, Armin found himself standing beside Layla, watching the sun dip behind the distant hills. Neither spoke for several moments, content in the quiet, the kind of silence that felt safe rather than oppressive. Then, almost unconsciously, he reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. The gesture was small, almost imperceptible, but it carried a weight of tenderness that surprised them both. Layla looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting a mixture of amusement, warmth, and something deeper, an acknowledgement that their relationship had begun to move beyond duty into the realm of genuine care. The villagers, accustomed to observing the couple, began to notice these subtle changes. Whispers shifted from speculation and judgment to curiosity tinged with approval. "They seem different," one elder remarked. "Not just respectful, but considerate of each other." The village, a place where reputation and perception mattered deeply, had started to witness a transformation, one that could not be ignored or dismissed. Even in the privacy of their home, small moments continued to build their connection. Armand found himself sharing his thoughts, fears, and memories with Layla, something he had never done with anyone. Layla listened patiently, offering comfort or insight without judgment. In return, she allowed him glimpses into her life, her traditions, and the experiences that shaped her. Each conversation, no matter how brief, deepened their understanding and softened the boundaries between them. Yet, as much as affection was growing, uncertainty remained. Armin wrestled with lingering guilt over the resentment he had once felt, unsure if it was possible to fully embrace feelings that had emerged from a union he had not chosen. Layla, equally cautious, wondered if he truly saw her as an equal rather than a necessity imposed by tradition. These unspoken questions lingered, creating a tension that was both delicate and compelling, a push and pull that neither could ignore. The first real breakthrough occurred during a communal evening meal. A minor accident, a spilled dish, or a startled child could have caused frustration, but instead they laughed together, an unguarded, shared moment of joy that neither expected. Laughter, Armin realized, had been absent in their early interactions, replaced by awkwardness, caution, and silent judgment. Now, it flowed naturally, bridging the gap between obligation and personal connection. The days following the barn fire and the slow emergence of affection had brought Armin and Layla closer than either expected. The village had begun to accept. The couple, noting subtle signs of respect and cooperation that had blossomed into the earliest threads of genuine connection. Yet, amid this growing harmony, neither Armin nor Layla anticipated the revelation that would change everything. The astonishing twist concealed behind tradition, expectation, and appearances. It began with a seemingly ordinary visit. Layla's father arrived at their home, accompanied by a quiet dignity that immediately commanded attention. The villagers assumed he had come to discuss household matters or perhaps to reaffirm his family's approval. Armin, though curious, greeted him with cautious politeness, aware that Layla's family held influence and that every word spoken would carry weight. Once seated, Layla's father spoke directly, but with measured care. "Armin," he began, "there is something you must know, something that explains why this marriage was arranged in this way." Armin's brow furrowed. He had assumed all along that tradition alone had dictated their union, that Layla's family's intentions were conventional, bound by custom. Yet the tone of seriousness in her father's voice suggested a deeper purpose, one neither had suspected. "Layla's," father continued, "our family has been watching you, discreetly, for some time. Not to judge, but to understand your character, your values, and your integrity. The marriage was arranged not merely for tradition, but as a test, to see whether you were capable of becoming a worthy partner, someone who could honor our daughter and respect her world." Armand's mind reeled. A test? Everything. The obligation, the initial resentment, the struggles to adapt, the clashes over customs had been part of a larger design. He felt a strange mixture of betrayal, awe, and disbelief. He had believed. The union was imposed purely by circumstance, but now he understood that it had been a deliberate measure of character, orchestrated by Layla's family to evaluate him in ways he could not have anticipated. Layla remained silent beside him, her expression calm but unreadable. She had known all along the purpose behind the arrangement. Her role had been subtle, to guide, observe, and allow him to reveal the qualities her family sought, without interfering in the natural development of his actions. Every argument, every moment of cooperation, every display of patience and courage had been part of this intricate test. Armin struggled to reconcile the revelation with his own experiences. His initial resentment seemed both justified and trivial. The cooperation during the barn fire, the small gestures of kindness, and the growing mutual respect now carried additional significance. He realized that he had been evaluated not just on obedience, but on empathy, courage, intelligence, and integrity, qualities that could not be faked or forced. Layla's calm, measured guidance during the early clashes had been a subtle way to observe him in authentic circumstances. As the truth sank in, Armin felt a profound respect for Layla. Her patience, wisdom, and understanding were no longer just admirable. They were deliberate and purposeful, demonstrating a depth of character that surpassed his own expectations. He recognized that her actions, even the moments of apparent disagreement, had been part of a larger framework designed to nurture both growth and understanding. The conversation continued, with Layla's father emphasizing that this revelation was not intended to embarrass or manipulate, but to provide clarity and context. "We believe," he said gently, "that Armin has shown the qualities we hope to find. But more importantly, he has done so without knowing he was being measured. That is the truest test of character." Armin sat in stunned silence, the implications settling over him like a weight lifted and reshaped. The very challenges that had frustrated him, the arguments that had seemed trivial, the village scrutiny that had felt oppressive, all of it had been purposeful. And in navigating these challenges, he had demonstrated patience, courage, and respect that even he had not fully recognized in himself. Layla finally spoke, her voice soft yet firm. "I did not intervene to make it easy, Armin, but I have seen your heart, your intentions, and your ability to grow. That is why this marriage, why our union has become more than obligation. It is the start of something real, something built on understanding, respect, and trust." Armin looked at her, understanding finally dawning in full. The astonishing twist was not simply a plot devised by tradition. It was a carefully orchestrated opportunity for growth, revelation, and genuine partnership. His admiration for Layla deepened, as did his awareness of his own journey. He realized that the obstacles, conflicts, and challenges had been necessary, shaping a foundation that could sustain a meaningful relationship. The revelation of Layla's family's test marked a turning point, not only for Armin and Layla, but for the entire village. What had begun as a union defined by obligation and scrutiny was now infused with newfound meaning. Armin no longer saw the marriage as a burden. He recognized it as an opportunity to grow alongside someone whose character he deeply admired. Layla, too, approached their relationship with renewed confidence, knowing that the man beside her had been proven capable of respect, courage, and integrity. In the days following the revelation, the couple began to act with a subtle but unmistakable sense of unity. Their interactions shifted from tentative cooperation to deliberate collaboration. Tasks that once caused friction, arranging household chores, managing the garden, or organizing village events, were now handled with complementary effort. Armin's strength and decisiveness meshed with Layla's wisdom and strategic thinking, creating a rhythm that was both efficient and harmonious. Even the villagers who had long observed the couple's every move noticed the change. Murmurs of admiration began to replace whispers of judgment, and the community's perception of the marriage evolved in tandem with the couple's own understanding. One afternoon, the village faced a minor crisis when a sudden storm threatened to flood the fields. Previously, such events might have led to panic and disorganized effort, but now Armin and Layla led the villagers with calm authority. Layla directed the placement of sandbags and ensured that each family understood their role, while Armin coordinated the physical labor, lending strength where needed and supporting those struggling to keep pace. Their actions were synchronized, intuitive even, a reflection of the deepening bond between them. The storm passed with minimal damage, and the villagers' admiration for the couple's ability to work together grew. Within the home, the atmosphere had shifted as well. Meals were no longer tense affairs where minor disagreements could escalate. Instead, they became opportunities for conversation, laughter, and shared planning. Armin found himself actively seeking Layla's input, valuing her perspective on matters both practical and personal. Layla, in turn, noticed his attentiveness and willingness to adapt, appreciating the subtle ways he had begun to integrate her customs and preferences into daily life. Their relationship was evolving into a partnership built on mutual respect, understanding, and increasingly affection. Small gestures began to accumulate into meaningful expressions of care. Armin would fetch water for Layla without prompting, noticing when she had long days of work and offering comfort or assistance. Layla would prepare meals tailored to his tastes, mindful of his routines, and offer quiet encouragement when he struggled with difficult decisions. These actions, once minor, became the unspoken language of their growing connection, signaling a bond that extended beyond obligation into genuine companionship. The villagers, ever perceptive, took notice. Elders who had previously expressed skepticism now spoke with approval, citing the couple as an example of cooperation and adaptability. Children observed their interactions with curiosity, noting the subtle displays of kindness and patience. Even young adults in the village, who had once doubted the viability of a marriage arranged by tradition, began to see that respect, empathy, and understanding could flourish within such unions. For Armin and Layla, acceptance and unity were not instantaneous. They were cultivated through daily choices, shared experiences, and a willingness to embrace vulnerability. Conflicts still arose, as they always do in close relationships, but they were approached with dialogue rather than defensiveness, with compromise rather than resentment. The couple's shared history of challenges, from early misunderstandings to public scrutiny, from the barn fire to the revelation of Layla's family's test, had forged a foundation strong enough to support not only respect, but the beginnings of trust and emotional intimacy. One evening, as the sun set in golden streaks over the village, Armin and Layla sat together by the veranda, quietly watching the world settle into evening calm. Neither spoke at first, comfortable in the shared silence. Then Layla placed her hand on Armin's, a gesture of warmth, reassurance, and connection. He met her gaze, recognizing the depth of feeling that had grown between them, a mixture of respect, trust, and the earliest inklings of love. The moment was simple, unassuming yet profound, symbolizing the unity they had achieved through patience, understanding, and shared experience. By the end of this chapter in their lives, Armin and Layla had transcended the limitations of obligation. The marriage that had begun as a test, constrained by tradition and scrutinized by the village, had transformed into a partnership defined by mutual respect, collaboration, and genuine connection. The village, too, had adapted, moving from skepticism to admiration, recognizing the couple as a living example of how duty, courage, and understanding can evolve into something extraordinary. The morning sun rose over the village, casting golden light across the fields and rooftops, a quiet celebration of a new beginning. Armin and Layla had faced every test, challenge, and scrutiny that life and tradition could impose, and the bond they had forged now radiated stability, understanding, and mutual respect. Their relationship, which had begun under the weight of obligation and uncertainty, had grown into something far richer, an alliance grounded in admiration, trust, and the faint yet undeniable stirrings of love. The villagers, who had observed the couple with curiosity, skepticism, and at times judgment, now looked upon them with admiration. The transformation had been remarkable. Where once whispered rumors and doubts had circulated, now there was recognition and even pride in the way Armin and Layla had navigated both personal and communal challenges. Elder villagers spoke of them as an example of how tradition could intersect with personal growth, and younger villagers noted the couple's balance of respect, courage, and tenderness as something to emulate. The day was marked by celebration, though understated, for both families. Armin's father acknowledged the growth of his son with quiet pride, recognizing the patience, empathy, and resilience that had developed. Layla's family, too, celebrated her ability to guide, support, and nurture a union that might have otherwise faltered. The acknowledgement from both families carried a weight beyond mere approval. It was the culmination of months of trials, challenges, and small victories, each of which had shaped the couple into the people they were now. As the village gathered for a communal meal, the atmosphere was filled with warmth and joviality. Children ran freely, elders shared stories, and neighbors exchanged laughter. Armin and Layla, seated together, no longer seemed constrained by the formality or tension that had defined their early days. They moved with a natural ease, each supporting the other in subtle ways. Armin offering Layla water and attention, Layla guiding conversations and interactions with quiet authority. Every gesture, small and large, spoke to the unity they had cultivated, a partnership that had survived scrutiny, trial, and challenge. In a quiet moment, away from the bustle of the crowd, Armin took Layla's hand. "We've come a long way," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of reflection and newfound understanding. Layla smiled, her eyes reflecting warmth and trust. "We have," she agreed, "and this is only the beginning." There was a pause, a shared recognition of the journey they had undertaken, and the growth that had emerged from a union neither had initially chosen. The astonishing twist of their story, the revelation of Layla's family's test, was now fully understood and appreciated. It was not a manipulation, but a measure of character, a framework that allowed both Armin and Layla to grow and reveal qualities that might have otherwise remained hidden. This knowledge, once potentially disconcerting, now felt like a gift. It had taught them patience, courage, empathy, and the importance of observation and understanding. It had allowed them to develop a bond built on substance rather than obligation, creating a foundation capable of withstanding the inevitable challenges of life together.